In this video, we're going to talk about subtle forms of misconduct. You know, things like harassment, microaggressions. That's tricky stuff for us in HR. That's coming up right now. Hi there, I'm Andrea Adams, host of HR Shop Talk. Here we're going to talk about all things HR. I encourage you to subscribe to the show, please, or to the podcast to keep learning from my guests. Today, my guest is Maysa Hawash. Maysa and I talked a while back, and Maysa is the owner of ScaleX, which is a consulting and fractional HR company, but she has a new venture underway which relates to our current topic. Hi, Maysa. How are you?
Hi, Andrea. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
It's been a while.
Yes, and glad to have you back. Okay, so we're talking about subtle forms of misconduct and actually unfair treatment. So what kind of unfair treatment is happening in the workplace?
So, research shows that there's at least 70% of employees currently that are facing some form of unfair treatment. And, number is higher when you look at Gen Z workers, it's 86%. So there's a wide range of unfair treatment situations that happen in the workplace. And the range is really anywhere from very subtle signs of invalidation or microaggression. For example, being told you're so articulate if you're a woman of color, or you're being very aggressive if you happen to speak assertively in a meeting, in a performance, review, being told you should smile more. That's a form of microaggression because it implies that a stereotype around women that should be, pleasant and, they should smile and not be assertive because that's being aggressive. So those happen a lot. But there's also bullying that happens in the workplace. There is cases where people feel bullied, whether, it's isolated incidences, or they happen over time.
Right. And I described it as subtle, but some of this isn't subtle at all, actually. Harassment and I suppose even violence. Okay, so do you know what percentage of this type of unfair treatment is going unreported?
So we know through research that almost or about 70% of all workers, they would experience some sort of unfair treatment. This number is actually much higher for Gen Z. It's 86% of Gen Z employees right now have experienced some form of prejudice or unfair treatment, but only 30% of these get reported.
Why do you think that's like the Gen Zs are experiencing it more often? Are they more aware of it, or is something else changing?
That's definitely part of it. There's a lot of more awareness in the workplace right now, especially with the Me Too movement and the recent events that took place. So there's a lot more awareness, and Gen Z happens to be a lot more. They have an acute sense of justice, so they're more acutely aware of these things when they happen.
Okay, a couple questions here. Why are they not reporting? So only 30% are reported. Why aren't they being reported? And what's the consequences to the workplace when they aren't reported?
So I'll just give you a very quick example from my own experience. You go through something, and in this case, it's actually an extreme example of bullying that happened to me. I was sitting in an executive meeting with a group of men, typically white men. And during the meeting, I said something one of the executives didn't like, and he started yelling and screaming. And not only that, banging on the table. So not only was it scary, but it was also unexpected. So what do you do in these situations? I actually went to the CEO at the time, and I sent an email and said, this is unacceptable. But I received the most unexpected, shocking response from the CEO saying that I should be more compassionate and understanding towards this executive because they may have had some issues during their childhood. So when you're faced with responses like this, being told not only do you have to get over it, but also show compassion and understanding, and that responsibility lies within you to handle those situations. Are you going to go and report it again? And that happens a lot in the workplace. And again, this was maybe an extreme example, but a lot of us are told things like, stick to what you know, for example, or you're being too sensitive. This person actually doesn't mean anything. So that really is part of the reason why a lot of us don't come forward to report these things, because we feel invalidated, we feel slighted, and we feel gaslighted, to be honest. And so the incentive to come forward is not there. And then on the extreme side of things, there might be consequences. Some of us are actually scared of consequences, getting fired, or an opportunity for promotion immediately disappears because you chose to come forward with issues like this.
Speaking on my own behalf, like, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be the complainer. Complainers don't get opportunities. I totally get it. What are the consequences, though, to the workplace of having all this unreported stuff going on?
I mean, if anybody has experienced bullying, I mean, we react to it in different ways, right? So there's mental health implications. There's implications of not feeling empowered enough to do your job and to contribute equally. But some of us just vote by resignation. So we simply leave and, hope that the next workplace will have a safer environment for us. So the range is wide, and it could be, we're hearing the term quiet quitting right now, which is basically people getting fed up with doing more and going above and beyond and working in environments where they're not feeling supported. So their response is just to do the minimum. And that's one way of responding, but a lot of us just quit and go elsewhere.
Yep.
We may report it in an exit interview. We may choose not to, because, if you're afraid of consequences when you're still working in the workplace, you're probably still feeling that same fear. And that will, translate in hesitation to even report it in an exit interview.
Can I confess that I've actually given that advice to people? And probably more friends than people at work, but they are having these really serious struggles. And for me, they're really indicative that they're of something going on in the culture where that kind of thing is condoned. And it's really hard for one individual to go up against a whole culture of behavior. And frankly, for an individual, it probably is easier to just
quit quietly.
But that's bad, either quietly or not, or just actually quit. But that's obviously bad for an organization. So, I mean, I can speak to this too, I suppose, but what typically happens in an organization when someone complains? Let's go with,
well, where do we begin?
I know, but let's go with, say, I know there's some terrible things where, like in your example, where people are just totally ignored or show compassion. That's ridiculous. But in, more standard organizations who are a little bit more with it, what's more typical?
I mean, not everything warrants a formal complaint. So we're just going to shift a little bit to, being an HR. So HR folks, and I come from that background. And so do you, we're designed to fix problems, right? So when somebody comes to us with an issue, our immediate thinking is like, oh my God, is this something that requires an investigation? So that's basically our tendency is to think investigation, that's the only way to deal with it. But in most cases, and what we found is people just generally want validation, being told that, this actually is unfair. and then maybe suggesting resources to help them deal with the situation and help them navigate with the sensitive topic. But in most cases, and most of us are just looking for validation. When I went to the CEO with my issue, I wasn't looking for like a grand gesture of like justice all of a sudden. I wasn't looking for the other executive to be fired. I actually really wanted that validation from my boss, who was the CEO at the time. And, being told that it's actually my problem that I'm not showing compassion, a bit, it was very, interesting. So in organizations that, like you say, that are with it, there is a culture, there's a safety or psychological safety where people can actually feel validated when they bring these issues, and things actually are done to address these things at a systematic level, not just at the individual level. It's not the individual problem, like you said. You can't change an entire system. The more people feel comfortable coming forward with these concerns, the better it is for the organization, because they can actually design programs and initiatives to address the root cause of the issues. It could be, things around building awareness or training or other initiatives. But it's really about understanding what are those issues and where are they coming from, so that when they're designing programs, they're more appropriate. And they're not just throwing money at the problem, right? Hoping for the issue to disappear.
So I'm consulting too, and I've done investigations. Is an investigation, other than, addressing an individual issue, is that going to change anything?
Yeah, I mean, does everybody warrant an investigation, though? So if somebody comes to, let's say, a woman of color and says something like, "Oh, you're so articulate," or somebody gives an employee a nickname because they can't pronounce their name because they happen to be an immigrant with a non-Anglo name. Is that something that requires an investigation? I don't think so. I think it's a matter of raising the awareness, of helping people with tools and resources to become better communicators, better leaders, and to have the courage to say, I don't know how to deal with this. Help me figure it out. I think it's a matter of, being together in this journey. And, the whole diversity, equity, inclusion process, it's a journey. It's not just a once and done. So, having those open conversations and providing the psychological safety is actually more, in my opinion, it's a way to prevent situations from becoming worse. And then you need those investigations. It's almost like a preventative measure before you get to a toxic environment where everything is an investigation.
If this intrigued you, subscribe to see all the episodes and comment. Have you been subjected to any of this kind of unfair treatment? My guess is you have. If it was resolved well, tell me about that. How did that work out for you? Tell us all in the comment section. How can we do better? I know that you've got the solution that will help. So tell us a little bit about that, but also what are some of the things that without that HR could be doing?
HR skill sets can definitely benefit from diversity training. So we all, HR skill set is different than being an expert in EDI, right? So I think we can all benefit from getting ourselves educated on, first of all, what is microaggression?
Right.
Understanding what terminology means is actually a really good first step. The other thing I feel HR would really benefit from is to not have those assumptions and not have that immediate tendency, oh, I'm going to fix the problem. Sometimes you can't fix the problem. HR alone cannot fix the problem. Sometimes it's a matter of listening and showing real empathy and validating somebody's experience, because that's their experience. We can't discount somebody's experience because it doesn't fit, that mold of something I need to investigate and fix right now. So for me, it's about getting educated. It's about asking more questions, being curious, and having the ability to listen and really empathize with people's experiences.
So let's say you come to me and you say, yes, you had, and I'm like, well, yes, yeah, you had that experience and that sounds terrible. Okay, I just validated you. Now what?
Yeah. Now what? Now there's resources, right? So now that, we both had that shared, conversation. When you're educated as an HR leader, then you have access to more resources that you can share with your employee. You can also use that as a data point to inform culture conversations. So, don't just ignore that and say, hey,
Right.
well, if I can't investigate it, then I can't do anything about it. No, there's something you can do about it, because everything you hear is a data point. So what if 5 people came to you with the same kind of information? Then you have a trend, and then you can
Right.
do something about it.
Right.
And you can bring it to the executive team and say, hey, we have a cultural issue around this topic. Maybe we need to consider doing something about it.
Okay, but when only 30% of issues, and that's the whole range, you need more than 2 data points to establish a trend.
And this is actually a really good segue into why we created HearU. We were asked by companies to create something like this because they know they have issues. They just don't know how bad. They don't know where exactly in the organization. And they really, really care about creating safe workplaces. So they wanted to know, first of all, they wanted to be educated. They wanted to get that data, and they know that people are not coming forward. And part of it is because they're afraid, maybe because they feel, actually 73% of women surveyed, they say they don't think whatever they report is confidential. So can you imagine that? So they wanted a solution that was outside of the organization, because they care about creating an anonymous and safe way for people to report those cases. So HearU was actually created based on that, to offer something that was completely anonymous, completely safe for employees to come forward with these concerns, and that information is then aggregated and reported back to the employers so that they can have that opportunity and be proactive and do something about it, really get ahead instead of waiting until things fester and, all of a sudden we have a law case on our hands.
Right. How much data do you need to provide employers with that insight?
To keep things anonymous, we don't report anything before we get 5 data points. So when we have 5 cases reported, then it gets populated on the dashboard.
Like, it could take a really long time to get to those 5 data.
Yeah.
If you're a small company that's doing reasonably well.
Yeah, I mean, that's a best case scenario, right? Is that you have a platform and nobody's reporting anything. Assuming that we're doing a great job at educating and creating, an environment where people understand, that this tool is actually really safe and anonymous. I think if people don't report anything, that is actually, in a way, it's one data point. People not coming forward, but the best case scenario would be that actually people are fine, right? So ideally, we anticipate that maybe in the beginning, employers will get more data points. And then as we start building those, initiatives and transforming the culture, then those cases will diminish. That's the idea.
Right.
But, it really depends. It really depends on where the organization is on their D&I journey. It depends on how well we communicate with employees around access to the platform. The platform is easily accessible anyway, so anyone can access the platform from their phone, their computer, from home, whatever. But to your point, we don't know. We don't know how long it takes to get those 5 data points.
I don't know if it's a final question, but could employers be asking these questions, in their types of questions anyway, in their employee satisfaction survey or their engagement survey, if they're doing one? Could they be asking that kind of question?
A couple of things. Depends if the survey is actually done internally, managed internally or externally. There's a big difference in how much people feel comfortable or how comfortable people feel reporting these things. The other thing about engagement surveys is that they happen at a point in time. And so, by the time you have an opportunity to report it, maybe you've done with the emotion, you've done with the invalidation, you've done with the gaslighting. You're just kind of checked out already. So the platform is there all the time. Anytime you experience something yourself or you witness something happening, then you have the opportunity to bring it forward when it's still, top of mind.
Yeah, I certainly see a place for this. Having done these investigations and just feeling like, well, they're necessary, but they're also somehow inadequate. It's nice to hear about something like that. Well, thanks, Maysa. That was excellent and an area I see so much opportunity for HR to do better. Maysa and I did an episode on scaling up HR as a company is growing, and that episode is right here. Thanks for watching and see you next time.